name is Andrew King, the editor-in-chief for Canadian Musician, Canadian Music Trade, Professional Sound, and Professional Lighting and Production, the 4 publications published by NWC here in Canada. I will introduce in a moment our co-presenter, the publisher and president of NWC, Mr. Jim Norris. Quick little bit of info about the two of us. As I mentioned, Jim and I have collaborated with NAMM in the past, I guess it was about 2 years ago, on some resources, as we're talking about here, exhibitor resources to help drive traffic, generate buzz about the booth, help people with follow-up, etc. We've both also been a part of panels and workshops at a whole host of industry events from the musical products, audio, lighting, production markets. All this to say, you are in great hands. So a quick overview about NWC, an international communications company, in business for over 40 years at this point. We provide information, marketing, communications services for the various markets I just mentioned. Our 4 main trade publications, those being Canadian Music Trade, Canadian Musician, which is consumer-facing for musicians and the music industry in Canada, Professional Sound, an audio industry trade magazine covering every arm of the pro audio market, and Professional Lighting and Production, lighting, video, staging, all gets tucked in there. And NWC World is our homepage where you can find out more about the company and our various properties. In addition to communications and publishing, we are live event specialists. We have produced and or promoted, sometimes on our own, sometimes in collaboration with other companies or organizations, but a wide variety of live events, from trade events and exhibitions through to seminars, clinics, networking parties, etc. The NAMM show has long been a partner of ours, in addition to other heavyweight trade events, NAB, Audio Engineering Society, Pro Light and Sound. And as I mentioned before, between the two of us, Jim and I have a pretty extensive history with these type of events. Now, speaking to NAMM specifically, you may well be aware of this, being that you decided to invest in this show. But yeah, last year, NAMM had over 115,000 total registrants. And of course, this is between musical instruments and the other markets that it's serving. But yeah, covering almost 140 countries and representing a total of 11 billion US in buying power. So let's help turn those into leads and opportunities. You are among almost 2,000 exhibitors at the show this year, representing over 7,000 total brands. Of course, educational programming is a significant portion of what NAMM offers. And in total, with the overall, including the new ACC North that just opened last year, we're talking almost 2 million square feet of total space covered by this show. It is massive. So in the session today, we're dividing it up into 3 main sections here. First, we're going to help you build some buzz and attract visitors to your booth. This is a lot of work that you can be doing between now and when the show kicks off, some of it even as the show is kicking off. And we'll walk through that in just a moment. Following that, we're going to go through the present. You are at the show, the booth is set up. They announced that the show has opened at 10 a.m. A flood of people come through. We want to help you make sure that anyone that steps up to visit is getting a compelling booth experience and some of the different ways that you can ensure that's the case. And finally, post-show, effective follow-up. This is where your investment pays off. I can also very comfortably assert this is the area where people need the most help. And so we'll spend a bit of extra time focusing on that. But follow-up is critical to generating these opportunities. Alas, at last, Jim, thank you for your patience here. Let's jump into this. Jim Norris, president and publisher of NWC, building buzz and attracting quality visitors. We've got a list of bullet points here. And Jim, stage is set. Can we start walking through these?
Great. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody taking the time to make your show a better one. Shows cost a lot of money. Everything costs a lot of money nowadays, but you want to make sure you're getting the most out of it. Number 1 on our list here is just don't depend on what the NAMM show does. The NAMM show is very good at generating traffic, but from your point of view, all of that's very nice, but you just care about the traffic that comes to your booth. Quality and quantity. Quality certainly more important. So a few ways that you can get people out to your booth. Number one is email, of course. So you can either use a program like MailChimp or one of the mass, assuming you've built an email list, and if you haven't, you should be. So you should be targeting both current, past customers and also potential customers. With mass email, the open rate's only about 18%, so you've got to hit them a few times. Now, with the time you've got left, my suggestion is 3 emails, one this week. Today is best to get something out to your list, maybe tomorrow, one on Monday, and then because about 55% of people retrieve their email on their mobile device, you should also send an email the first day of the show, preferably first thing in the morning, obviously California time. But when people get up, a lot of times the first thing they do is they fire up their cell phone, have a look at their emails. That's a good reminder. You should phone, or somebody should phone your most important clients and invite them out. You should have something on your website, a banner or information that you're at the show. Social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, any of the social media you're using, you should at least do a few posts between now. And of course, you can also post during the show to come. Twitter is very good that way because it's instantaneous. Your sales reps, part of their function, of course, should be to email or call their customers. There's incentives are always a good idea. Something at your booth that you're giving away. We find that you doing contests work really well. People come, they fill out a ballot, and they win something. It could be a product or it could be anything. It doesn't matter what it is. Could be swag. There's a lot of things that you can give out that will attract people. And one thing that's really important is to make appointments. We get invitations and it just says drop by sometime. You just don't get to those. I mean, they just end up at the end of your list. So what you want are solid appointments every day, that when people come and see you, it just makes the whole experience of coming to your booth a lot more serious. And then you can do follow-up, of course, as well. If people have confirmed that they're coming to your booth, you could send them an email follow-up, maybe, again, the day of the show, just reminding them of the appointment. But you'll get better quality and better attention if you make appointments rather than just drop by sometime.
Mm-hmm. On that note, there are some companies I've seen that have set up pages in like SurveyMonkey or similar services where it's all automated. Anyone can go in, pick an open time for that appointment. Once someone has selected that time, it's taken off of that database, and basically just makes it very easy for your visitors to choose times that are convenient for them. You get the report of who's coming when, and it just saves a lot of hassle on both ends. And I'd also mention, with these different avenues, email, I guess in particular email, social media, anything online, leverage what you're doing. Some of the other things here, incentives and giveaways. Anyone attending the show has got a pretty good idea that if they go to your booth, they'll see product. You can still highlight what's new or noteworthy at the booth on the tech side, but as Jim mentioned, contests are very good traffic drivers. If you've got any celebrity signings or demos, anything special happening at a certain time, make sure to highlight that too. Basically, anything that's just going to stand out above the noise of a bunch of people saying, come look at the stuff we've got. Some of these special initiatives are going to do well to attract people to spend some of their time with you. So again, if you've got any questions on any of these, they can come in at any point in your question window. We'll have a question period at the end, but if there's anything pertinent, we'll put it in front of Jim now. But that brings us to your in-booth experience here, and we can spend a bit more time talking about some of these. But Jim, if you want to take it away and just start off with, staff communication, getting everyone on the same page, who's at the booth or in some cases maybe even back at the office supporting it.
Yeah, I find a lot of booths you go in and a lot of the people don't really know what's going on. So it makes sense before the show, certainly, to meet with people or put together a document with all the information that everybody should know. A lot of times there's new products at a show, so that's a challenge, making sure that everybody's up on the new products. And then, certainly during setup day, a meeting with everybody is going to be in the booth. It's worth some time answering questions and making sure that everybody knows what's going on. I find a lot of booths, it's just confusion. Booth layout, it just, I think the main thing, it's got to be welcoming and receptive in the way it's laid out. If you're going to have meetings of some sort, it makes sense to have some chairs, a table, and so people can actually sit down and have a meeting. But the main thing is when people, I walk by a lot of booths and they just don't look welcoming. Either the booth itself or in some cases the people in it just don't look like they really want you to come and visit. And sometimes the branding is confusing as well, that what it's about. So welcoming visitors. So somebody shows up at your booth, I think it's important to have one person who sort of takes the lead on that, sort of like the Walmart greeter almost, and that, they make sure that if somebody comes in, that somebody pays attention to them, because a lot of times you walk into a booth, everybody ignores you, you're just standing there. So if somebody's in charge of that, that just makes it much easier. If you're doing demonstrations, particularly for any larger group of people, it's important to have a PA system or headphones or something. The NAMM show in many areas is a noisy place. We go to a lot of press conferences where there is no PA. You can't hear anything, and it's almost a waste of time. So I think if you're one-on-one, it's not so difficult. But if you've got a group, make sure that they can actually hear what's being demonstrated. Obviously, for performances, decent PA system, all that. In a digital world, people still like something they can take with them. So it doesn't even have to be that complicated. A postcard's a good idea, something small like that, that's got your contact information and your website. They can take it with them, throw it in their briefcase. They probably don't need, stacks of brochures, but just something you can hand out. And if it's something useful, like a notepad or whatever, those things are good as well. So for companies that are short-staffed, I guess, sometimes they might hire a booth assistant, and NAMM has those kinds of services. But we've found a lot of temporary staffing agencies like Randstad and that are very good at this, and you can get exactly what you're looking for. They have people that have worked trade shows before, and they kind of know what they're doing. But again, they have to be trained. They have to have the same kind of communication that the staff is getting. So have them come early before the show starts and sit down with them. And some of them are amazing. They can pick it up very quickly. Make sure they know how to dress appropriately for what your branding is. But, that can be a really good solution if you're short-staffed, or some smaller companies only have one or two people there. So sometimes another person, for what it costs, can really fill in the gap.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. And we know that the majority of the folks joining us here are from smaller companies, and in some cases from other parts of the world where maybe there will be a minimal staff at the show. So absolutely consider the temporary help, which is important, because going back to how inviting your booth is, I guess the curb appeal, will say, Jim nailed it. I actually, personally speaking, I know this is subjective, but I actually find the body language and comportment of the personnel in the booth to be almost captures more of my attention than the booth itself. And in some cases, there are times if there's only one person in the booth, like, sure, you've got to eat, but someone cramming lunch out of a takeout container in a booth is very uninviting and unappealing. Definitely does not make an inviting to initiate a conversation. Same, we've seen people sleeping in their booths. In some cases, the staff might get very insular and start having a private conversation that, again, like, people walking by may not want to interrupt. You want to make it as inviting and welcoming as possible, that even if you're making eye contact with someone, that it's clear to them that you're there for them, if they have any questions, if they want to be shown around. Just really stress the comportment of the staff in your booth, particularly if you've got a main kind of greeter or contact that's kind of the first contact with traffic, something to keep in mind. And Jim, was there anything you wanted to add on any of these, or? are
Well,
we
that
in good
one,
shape?
that one especially. I believe it was NAMM last year. I went by a booth, and it was a company that sold lighting products. They had no lighting in their booth, so it was like pitch black. One person was actually asleep in his chair, and the other one was eating a cheeseburger. And I actually had to take a picture of it, and I sent it to my contact at NAMM, and I just said, this is like unbelievable. They spent all this money. They've traveled there. Presumably they have some products that somebody's interested in, but nobody would approach them. The other thing I notice as well, and we notice this when we exhibit, people will come by your booth, and a lot of times it's not really clear to them what you do. So they'll kind of stand out there 20 feet and look. So it's important there to just say hello to people. Hi, how you doing? And then they'll start to approach, and then they'll ask you about, what you do or whatever it is. But a lot of times it's not clear to them what it is you do. So rather than them being embarrassed by asking, they just move on. So even just saying hello, and I notice that in a lot of music stores. Same thing. You walk in, you could die at the front entrance and nobody would notice. It's just they don't say hello, they don't greet people, and that just makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm. And on the note of compelling, we talked at the beginning about building buzz. So here, this is again where you want to think of just anything that you can include that will help you stand out, help your exhibit stand out, help what you do stand out. Jim nailed it. It's not always going to be immediately clear what it is you do. The clearer you can make it with your displays, with your signage, the better. And then with that too, like for example, Jim had mentioned that we've had really good success doing draws or contests out of booths in the past. For some of those, like we've got this cool little mini drum kit where the bass drum has a see-through head, and that's essentially the ballot box. It always gets comments when it's out on a table. And again, that's something that just catches people's eyes, and sometimes it just takes that quick spark and you've engaged in conversation, and who knows what can come from that. So all this to say is just anything that you can include that is going to grab someone's attention. If you think it would grab your attention, chances are it'll grab other people's attention. And yeah, lastly, Jim was just talking about some of the experiences we've had. That photo that he took, if you've done a trade event before, or even at NAMM on that first day of the show, a great source of other ideas is from the other exhibitors, many of whom do a really good job at this. So don't be afraid to, I guess, borrow ideas from what you're seeing. And like I say, if it's effective for you, it's probably effective for others. Any questions on any of this stuff, again, please submit. We'll jump to it in good time. Now, as I mentioned, we want to spend a bit of extra time on the follow-up. I can't stress enough how vitally important this is to capitalizing on the opportunities and potential opportunities that you've generated. But really, yeah, it's just good form. Reconnecting with people, it is a new opportunity to engage in a conversation once the dust is settled on the show. I guess I'll let Jim weigh in here because this is really his expertise. But let's talk about this, developing a plan ahead of time so that once the show's over, you can hit the ground running. Jim?
This is the area that I find most exhibitors do the worst job at. I've been to so many trade shows, had my badge scanned, filled out things, and then just never got anything. And I find most exhibitors, large and small, do a very poor job on follow-up. And yet, they've spent all this money, they've generated leads, they've got all kinds of interest, and yet people don't get the information they're looking for or a follow-up. So the key is now, in the next week or so, is to develop a plan. Don't wait. What happens with most people is they're up to their ass in emails now and everything else to do for the show, so they don't have time. And then, of course, at the show, they're going nuts. And when you get back, you've got 1,000 emails. So what happens is you don't do the follow-up. And the longer the time goes on, the less valuable it is. So you need to have a plan, exactly what's going to do, who's going to do it. If you're going to send emails, get them all composed now and ready to go. If you're going to do something through the mail, which you might be sending out a brochure, get that all done. Even in envelopes ready to go, so you can just slap a label on them and get them out. And then you can get to it quickly afterwards. But most people don't have that. It's just, God, if I get through this show in one piece, it'll be a miracle. So as far as gathering the contacts at the show, simple analog way is business cards. So you get somebody's business card, write on the back of it what it's about. That's certainly what we do at shows. And then, you know, because otherwise you find this clump of business cards and it's like, who is he and what did he want? NAMM and every other show has lead retrieval machines available, where you can scan the badges, you get all the information. You can get it in a digital format that you can use for follow-up, and that's certainly one way to do it. One way that we use, and it's very analog, but we find it works really well, is just a sheet where people can give you their email address and their phone number, and they just fill it out. And it seems we've tried apps on the iPad and all kinds of things, and they don't seem to work very well. But if somebody especially if there's a contest, they can fill out a ballot or just fill it out on a sheet and give you their information. There's also in both the Apple world and with Android, there's a lot of apps available that will read the codes and will also read business cards as well. So you can scan all the business cards in, and the apps are either free or close to it. So that's another way to automate it and make it a lot more easy to do. And if it's easier to do, then you're more likely to do it. And then, yeah, so on to the next one. Okay, so different ways to follow up. So obvious one is email. And again, remembering that, you know, again, if you do a mass email, a small percentage are actually going to open it. The industry average is about 18%. So you may have to email them more than once. You can certainly phone people. With a lot of people, the phone isn't as popular as it was, but that's one more reason to use it. Postal mail is very effective, 100% delivery rate, so you might send out a postcard or send out brochures, whatever it is. Another thing might be to set up appointments after the show, and that's certainly a good follow-up. And then, of course, making sure that the correct sales rep gets the information, contact information, and what it is that they're looking for. Now, another thing to do, and I do this pretty regularly, is that a lot of the follow-up I do is actually at the show. So at night, if there's things that are urgent, I'll actually do the email then right away so they get it during the show. Now, it might require an email later, but at least you'll be ahead of everybody else, and it's not that hard. Most people are set up so they can send email. So you get the information, send them an email right from the show, and that works really well. The main thing is time is of the essence. When the show ends, there's a clock ticking. One thing to remember is that depending on what products that you have, let's say you sell guitars, so you've awakened an interest in your guitars, but you've also awakened an interest in that category, whatever it is. So if somebody else gets to them first with a similar product, they will probably get the sale. So being first is super important. So don't leave, and sometimes people leave it so long that it's almost embarrassing to follow up at all. So, you know, the quicker you can get it out to people, the better. And it's just important because at that show, you've got another couple of thousand companies. Well, of course, many of them won't do any follow-up, but you've certainly got some competitors that are going to be good at follow-up, and you want to make sure you're first, because this is where people fail, and this is where the investment doesn't pay off because the follow-up isn't there. It's not pre-thought, and it's not even done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another thing to toss in there, I guess, building on what Jim just mentioned, is this is a very exciting show, and a lot of people travel from far and wide. It's in many cases the highlight of their year. So I always find people are buzzing, very energetic, and maybe just fast and loose, I suppose, with their socializing. You know, in the evening, you've got a lot of receptions and drinks being had. All this to say, you know, if you're chatting with someone and get somewhere exciting with them just based on the energy of the show, the quicker that you're following up, the quicker you can capture and I guess kind of hold them to any commitments made or any ideas that were discussed. Whereas, once the show is over, people are back to work, buried in things to do, getting caught up, maybe some follow-up from other exhibitors, but you just lose a bit of that momentum and excitement, which in many cases might translate to sales and dollars. So bear that in mind as well.
Another thing there, just to add in, I find when I go to a lot of booths, the people don't have business cards themselves, or they ran out, or they had a beautiful brochure, but they just ran out. So, it costs very little to print a few extra of anything. So just make sure you've got that part of it too, so they can walk away with something. And, or you get some people just don't even have business cards. They're on the booth, and I just joined the company 3 years ago, and they haven't given me a business card yet. It's just, get that part together as well, so that they've got the information to take with them also.
Mm-hmm. So I guess just to make clear, a question just came in. What's the best timeline for follow-up? Right after the show or the beginning of the next week? What do you think, Jim?
The faster the better, really. And it should be a series. You can automate a lot of that depending on your systems, but even if you do it manually, like what I would do personally is send one during the show and just say, as I promised, this is what I'm going to do. That's a pain because you're out eating steak and drinking beer, but if you can do that one, and then I would say in the first few days, like the show ends on a Sunday, I would say another email has to go out in those first few days for sure. And then some of it's going to depend on the response. Some of those would require a phone call. And again, in that week, because once people get past the next weekend, they're on to other things. Sometimes they're going to other trade shows. So really the sooner the better. But again, have a plan that, you're going to do one during the show to the best leads, another one during that next week, and maybe the week after that, a phone call. But having a plan and making sure that everybody in your organization knows what they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess we'll jump back. Someone's wondering if you can go over, and this came up, we were using it specifically in the context of gathering contacts
right.
for your follow-up. Can you reiterate what lead retrieval means?
Okay, most shows have a machine that you can use. They rent them. NAMM, it would be in your exhibitor's kit, and if not, you could just email your rep. And they have companies that rent these machines, and it's just a scanner basically that will scan the information on their badge, because there's a code on their badge. All of their information is on that. And then in the olden days, it used to print out a real long piece of paper. Nowadays, it tends to store it digitally. So then you can get that Excel file and put it into your system once the show's over. And, it doesn't cost a whole ton of money, but it works great because, and again, have somebody in the bigger booths, like they'll have one person that's doing that scanning. And if people come in, they just scan them and it's done. You don't have to do anything else. And it's 100% the information that they registered with.
Mm-hmm. I've seen companies too where they'll have designated people at the outside or front of the booth to do the scanning. And in some cases, once you've scanned, they'll give you a little like ticket or something that you can claim for. I think in this case, it was a pack of guitar strings or something. Right. But again, most people will voluntarily let you scan their badge. Some people, I guess, almost anticipate it being leading to spam. So that's where a little incentive to do the scan might get you a few other people, but just something to think about.
And I think there too, it makes sense to ask, not just walk up to somebody and start scanning them. I think it's best to say, do you mind if I scan your badge? And then if they do, then you don't. But if they don't mind, then you do it. They might ask what it's for, and you could just say, well, we just want to send you some information after the show. But that's the way to do it. Just ask permission, because you are violating their space.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Larry. We mentioned that you can get apps that do lead retrieval, but Larry mentions that NAMM also offers an app as an option outside of the designated machine, so that you can use your own device and save a bit of money. Zoe's wondering what information this lead retrieval machine will gather. Basically, yeah, when you register for the NAMM show, and a lot of this information is on your badge, but some of it's not. When you register for the NAMM show, you're filling out all these fields of your information. The lead retrieval machine, then once you scan that badge, they basically get, I'm not sure if they'd be privy to everything, but basically who was there, their contact info, and basically the fields that you would have filled out when registering.
Exactly, and what you have to do is add to that, obviously, if there's particular notes that they wanted information on a particular product, because that's not going to be on their badge, but certainly on their badge will be their company, their name, their address, their phone number, their email address, and then you just have to add to that if there's anything relevant.
Oh, right on. Another quick one here, just ballpark, Jim, but someone's wondering for booth assistants, if you have any idea what you might pay locally, maybe we can say per day, to have to hire someone through a temp agency?
It's negotiable, but it's about $15 to $20 an hour. And again, you don't necessarily have to have them there the whole day. All of that's negotiable. So you might decide that they're only going to be there with you during the busiest hours. But yeah, that's negotiable. As I mentioned, we found Randstad to be really good. They're a worldwide company. They're huge. And you tell them what you're looking for, and it costs less that way. If you go through the ones that specialize in booth personnel through NAMM, they're going to cost you more. But a temporary personnel agency of any kind does that kind of thing, and there's a lot of them around Anaheim just because there's so many trade shows there, and some of them are incredible. We've had most, I wouldn't say perfect experience with some of them, but make sure too when the agency arranges it that you get their information. So don't just count on the fact that they're going to show up. Get their cell number and their email address ahead of time. Have them go through your website and your social media, so before they even come to the show, they have some clue what you do.
Mm-hmm. All right, we've gone through the queue of questions. A couple of last things to touch on here, but if anyone has anything last minute they want to put in front of us, please submit. Very quickly, you would likely have received most of these through your rep when you signed on to Exhibit, but they're handy, they're in one spot. We've done a nice clean redirect here just for your purpose. To make clear, if you go to nwcworld.com/NAMM Resources, that's just going to take you to NAMM's site where they've got, I think it's nearly 10 PDFs that they offer all of their exhibitors, but just things you might need. There's NAMM logo package, there's booth setup info, etc. If you visit that, anything that NAMM's got on offer is available in one clean spot. And then for us, I want to make clear, both Jim and I will be down at the 2019 NAMM show. Our email addresses are here. If you're interested in making an appointment, I'm the editor-in-chief. I cover all things editorial. Jim is our president and publisher, but oversees advertising and marketing and promotional services. So get in touch if you want to connect at the show. If you've got any additional questions between now and then, or even afterwards, we want to make ourselves available to you. So there's our specific email addresses as well as the general contact information for NWC. You can hit us up at any time. A couple more came in here. Jim, do you happen to know the name of any of the apps that you can use for lead retrieval? Apparently the official one through the NAMM show is costly, not as costly as the machines, but still fairly significant. Any that you would recommend?
Not offhand, but there's kind of two things to look for. One are business card readers, and those are easy to find. And basically, it'll just use the camera on your phone, and it scans the information so that you can export it into a database. So that's one pretty easy way. But there's a lot of them, too, that just do scan barcodes and QR codes. So you'll find those on there as well. Again, if you just do a search on the Apple Store or on the Google Store, you'll find those. And then the key is, download them ahead of time, make sure you know how they work and try them, and then see if they work. But there's lots of them, and to keep track of them is difficult because there's adding ones all the time. But it's another way of doing it. Most of them are free or close to it, and there's if you just do a search, you'll find them for sure.
Right on. And you can actually do your own test. Even though you haven't picked up your badge at the show, most likely at this point, there is, when you're registering, it'll offer you a preview of what your badge will look like with the QR code. So I'm thinking before you even travel, you can test out those apps on your badge, see what information you get, see if you like how it works, just so you know what you're getting into when you get on site. This is a great question, and I guess we can just spitball here, but Jim, any advice for exhibitors with very small, the 5x10 booths where space is considerably limited?
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends on your product, but certainly you want to make sure in a booth that's that small, you want to make sure that there's a good focus. In other words, don't put everything possible in the booth because it just ends up clutter. So you want it to be simple and clean, and a good backdrop. More than important, the people that are in the booth, because you can't fit many there. Make sure that while they're there, that's another thing I see a lot is people have a break. They should leave the booth. They shouldn't be there. They're either working or they're not. And sometimes you see people who are on a break and they're eating their lunch and goodness knows what else they're doing, but they should just leave and not be there. And the people, it's better to have two people that are working in the booth dealing with the customer than five people. And it's just confusing to the people that approach the booth as well. So, obviously you have challenges in a smaller booth, but on the other hand, a lot of times you have very niche or specific products that people are looking for. And, a lot of times percentage-wise, you get more out of the booth than the big guys do, especially if you're a first-time exhibitor. But again, you've got to make sure you do the follow-up. Quality of leads is way more important. And lifetime value of a customer is really the concept. It's not necessarily what they ordered at the show. People tend not to order at the show anymore. It tends to be the follow-up. But again, if you could get a new dealer for your product that you keep for 10 years, well, that's worth a lot of money. And that's the way you have to do it, is try and get them, keep them happy, engage them. And you don't need, 115,000 people at your booth. You might only need 10, or if you're selling high-end PA gear, you don't need very many. You just need a few with a lot of money.
Thank you to Rich here. Our error. Apparently, the QR code readers, the general ones or in the App Store, won't actually work with the NAMM badges. Their codes are proprietary, and that's how they keep you in the ecosystem of either renting the hardware or using their designated app. So apologies there.
Shame on them. Anyway, yeah, so you're stuck then with lead retrieval or business cards, and you can certainly scan business cards easily.
There you go. Yeah, there are many apps for that.
Yeah, I didn't know that about the NAMM badges, but that's smart on their part, I guess.
Yeah, good on them. And thank you, Rich, for clarifying that varies from show to show. Yeah. Anyhow, it is a busy day. It is a busy day just a few away from the NAMM show, where, again, we know that you've devoted a lot of money, a lot of resources to this. And yeah, we just wanted to offer some quick tips that you can put into action right away to help, just take you over the edge, maximize every bit of value from your investment. It's definitely a wise one. We attend the NAMM show every year. It's a great show. It's only getting bigger and expanding its scope. So thanks to our partners at NAMM as well, and thanks to you for joining us. We hope it's a great show. Again, our contact info was on the previous slide. You will, everyone hearing me right now, and as well as those that registered that weren't able to actually attend, there will be a link going out to a recording of this session that you can share with your staff, share with any colleagues. Feel free. It'll be available very, very shortly. And once again, nwcworld.com is our home base where you can learn more about the company, about our magazines, about our marketing and promotional services, about our live event services, and everything else. Thank you again to Rich. Thank you to all of you. Jim, anything before we let folks get back to their day?
Do the follow-up.
Wise words. Thank you very much again, and cheers to a great 2019 NAMM show.